All right, class. We are going to discuss global variables in this one. Now, normally what we deal with is what's called a local variable. So if I create a variable anywhere, let's say in the main here, equals 8, right? This variable is local to the main. Once I get to the end of the brace, it doesn't exist anymore. The only place I can use this is inside the main. Now if I make a method, just a simple method up here, and I'm gonna, well, I don't even have to pass it anything. I'll just leave it like that. And all it's gonna do is just simply print, make a number, print it. Let's say int number equals 10. I print the number is now in this case I have a local variable here. So local just means that it can only be used within a certain area, a certain scope. Now when the scope is the entire class, that's when it's considered a global variable. So if I want to declare a global variable, I can declare it up here, pretty much directly under the class. There are one or two things I'll have to do to make it work, but it's a little bit different than your normal variable. The way I usually describe it is, if I declare a variable here in the main, basically the main is a box, and everything in that box can see this variable. If I make an if statement underneath that, if true, every time I have a brace, that's another box. Now, inside this, I can make a change to the variable above it because, well, this box is inside this box. These braces are inside this one. Anything inside this main can look up to the top and see this variable. Now, once we leave this box, we have nothing, right? This variable only exists inside the box. Once I leave the box, it's gone. If I declare a variable inside, int number 1 equals 100, this variable only exists inside this brace. After that, it doesn't. Can't find it. Now, the plus of using a global variable is this. If I declare a variable at the very top, everything in my program can see it. Now, this means instead of me having to pass this variable up here, int number, and when I call this print, I can just, use the number that I pass. Instead of having to do that, I can have a global variable and I can access it from anywhere. So whenever you're doing global variable, typically you're going to have public, well, let me tab that over some, public, and you will have a static int number equals, let's say 10. Now notice, all the other variables just turned yellow, they didn't turn red. And this number is green. If you see a green, that typically means it's going to be a global variable. And it's probably going to tell me something about local variable hides a field. That means that this number here actually kind of covers up that. So if I say number equals 10, it's going to be this variable instead of that variable. But the nice thing about this is I don't have to declare these anymore. I can come right here, and now if I run print, you'll see the number is 10. If I make any changes, let's say I come here and I say, number equals 100. Well, the number is 100. If I come down here and I try to print it here, the number is plus number. It's 10 again because I changed it right here. So if I took that out, you'd see it would still be 100 after the change. So a global variable is nice in that everyone can access it. I don't have to pass it back and forth between methods. I can just declare it one time up here, and then this method can change it, this method can change it, other methods can change it without having to have this extra little bit in here to pass. Well, you may ask yourself then, why don't we just make everything global? Well, having a global variable is like a double-edged sword. You have, you know, the plus side is everything can access it, right? Everything can change it. You don't have to pass things back and forth. The downside is everything can access it and everything can change it. There are times where you only want certain things to be able to change this value. You don't want anybody to be able to change it. Let's take a program, for example, a game. And there's a variable that decides how big your character is, like in Mario, right? You eat a mushroom, he grows double the size. He has some new powers attributed to that. He can break bricks and stuff. He doesn't die in one shot. But what if that variable is global? And somebody who was writing, some code somewhere else, since it's global, they can access that variable, decided to change it. Instead of, 0 being your normal state, 1 being a larger state, they make you bigger. 2, 3, 4, 5 or something. And your character grows in proportion. Well, the game might not be able to handle that. It might not know, well, what am I supposed to do if you're this big? Everyone else's code is built around it being, small or big. Well, suddenly some Yahoo writes a code that swaps that number out to 10 or something. Mario's the size of the screen. And then the whole game crashes because that's not what it was built around. So that's the negative to having things public. Now, public also means that everything in this class or anywhere else can access it. If I made this private, which it wouldn't really affect anything here, it means just this file can access it. But we'll see more of that later on. Most of the time, your stuff will just be public for now, but typically all variables will end up being private, so other files and other programs can't access it directly. Now the static has to be static because these are static. If I take out the static, watch what happens. Non-static variable cannot be referenced from a static context. There you go. So the problem with your main, for example, it is public static void, if you notice, is everything that interacts with it has to be static as well. Every method. If I get rid of this method here, I get rid of the static, then it's going to give that same complaint. Static main basically requires everything that interacts with it to be static as well. Now, if we had multiple files, that would be fine otherwise. But global variables and methods will all have to be static if they're inside this main file. Now, hopefully that gives you an idea about global variables. And again, there are times where you'd want to use them. Let's say if you had a player 1, player 2, and you were swapping back and forth. That would probably be a pretty decent thing to have a global variable. If you're player 1, display this character model. If you're player 2, display that character model. And this statistics information. Something that you're going to use throughout the entire program that's just going to be a pain to pass back and forth. Would be something you'd want to have as a global variable. This could be like player turns, which player it is, how many turns have happened in a game or something like that. Something along the lines of that. So hopefully that enlightens you a little bit with global variables, and you can use them if you want, but you do have to be cautious not to overly use them. If I just have a whole list of global variables so I don't have to pass anything, it can lead to crashes and funky happenings and stuff like that. So you only really want to make a global variable when you really have to. Most of the time, passing things back and forth tends to be the better course of action, but it depends on the project. Like so much in programming, there's literally several different ways to do the same thing. I could erase this and then just pass a variable here and make changes and return the variable down here and make other changes. So there are a couple of different ways I could do this. But this is just one of those possibilities. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. If not, I will see you again.